Hello, just to let you know, I'll soon be making a video that you can be involved in, so if you want to find out how, wait until the very end of this video and I'll tell you all about it. Off we go. I'm Peter Austin, that is, well, it's the moon, and this is interesting. The lunar surface is covered with craters that form an instantly recognisable texture. Many say there's a man in the moon, others a rabbit, and some cultures see a toad. Such is the power of pareidolia, the tendency for humans to spot recognisable shapes in random patterns. But what if I told you the United States almost altered this image forever by adding a new giant crater to the lunar surface on purpose using a nuclear bomb? I'm not kidding. America at one point seriously considered nuking the moon, and we're going to learn all about it today. This is the story of Project A119. For this tale, we have to go back to Cold War America. In 1951, the USA and their rivals, the Soviet Union, both publicly stated their intentions to launch artificial satellites into orbit around the Earth, kicking off what would become known as the space race. Now, there were practical strategic reasons for this competition, namely trying to outpace each other in satellite reconnaissance, but it was as much about flexing. Both sides wanted to show their enemy and the rest of the world their technological superiority in order to boost their national security. So, when the Soviet Union were the first to put a man-made satellite into orbit, Sputnik 1, the US found itself in the Sputnik crisis, a period of public anxiety rooted in the belief that the Russians were pulling ahead in a major way. One particularly troubling detail was the fact that the rocket used to get the Sputnik satellite into orbit could also be used to deliver nuclear warheads at an intercontinental range. The US knew they needed to answer back in a major way. Politicians and military generals were keen to restore American prestige and level the playing field in the space and nuclear arms races, and one proposal for this was a top-secret US Air Force project called a Study of Lunar Research Flights, better known by its codename Project A119. Or maybe it's A119, I've never actually heard it read out loud. Put simply though, the idea was to detonate a nuclear warhead on the surface of the moon, creating a flash of light and plume of dust visible to the naked eye on Earth, all under the pretense that it would provide useful data to the scientific community. Now, it's true, there were all kinds of questions still unanswered at the time about the geology and atmospheric conditions of our natural satellite, and observing a gigantic explosion on the lunar surface would help scientists infer a great many things about the moon. Is it covered in a thick layer of dust? How do craters form and change in low gravity? Does it actually have a very thin atmosphere that had at the time been undetectable from Earth? Yes, it does, incidentally. All of these questions and more justified the proposal to nuke the moon, but really, the science was not a priority. It certainly made it more likely that it would be approved and funded, but in truth, Project A119 was a scientific endeavour in name only. The Americans' real reason for wanting to nuke the moon was to show the Russians and the US population that they could nuke the moon. Documents pertaining to the project, released in 2000, specified that the detonation should occur along the moon's terminator line, the boundary between the light and dark sides, so that the plume would be illuminated by sunlight, maximising its potential visibility to the naked eye. Likewise, a team of researchers assigned to the project, including a young doctoral student called Carl Sagan, were tasked with calculating the likely size and distribution of the dust cloud, again to work out how visible it was likely to be from the Earth's surface. Now, the geologists and astronomers who might have been interested in observing the explosion for science were already well equipped with powerful telescopes and the like. It was therefore not a necessity as far as scientific research was concerned that the plume should be visible to the naked eye, and yet the project still demanded it. And the reason for this, of course, is that the whole concept was very much a PR move above all else, and an international one at that. This is further evidenced by the fact that the Air Force initially planned on sending sending not any old nuclear warhead up there, but a hydrogen bomb, which, as it turned out, was far too heavy for the rockets of the day and quickly removed from the plans. Instead, they settled on the W-25, a relatively small warhead by that time, but still enough to have the desired effect. Clearly, the researchers and military personnel involved in the plan were deadly serious about seeing it through at one stage, so why did it never happen in the end? Well, because, perhaps unsurprisingly, the operative word in that previous sentence was deadly. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that nuclear weapons are dangerous things. Combine that particular trait with new and relatively unreliable rocket science, high political tensions between the superpowers, and a great deal of unknowns about lunar conditions, and you can come up with a whole shopping list of reasons why it might not actually be the best idea to launch a W-25 nuclear warhead beyond the atmosphere and detonate it on the surface of a celestial body that we were starting to think about sending manned missions to. In short, the project seems to have been cancelled for three main risks. If something went wrong, it could pose a danger to the US or its allies, it could cause an international incident if a Soviet state was affected, and if nothing went wrong and they successfully detonated a nuclear device on the moon, the fallout left behind could cause all sorts of problems if and when astronauts ever got there. And indeed, therein lay the better alternative. Get a man on the moon rather than a weapon of mass destruction, and you win the space race hands down. And so, in January 1959, the US canned Project A119 and instead switched focus to the Apollo program, successfully taking their giant leap just a decade later on July the 20th, 1969. Perhaps the most interesting thing here, though, is that seemingly the US weren't alone in wanting to launch a nuclear weapon at the moon during the Cold War. Details are a little sketchy here, but seemingly in 1958, the Soviets were working on a four-stage plan, simply codenamed E. The first three steps of this endeavour involved sending probes to the moon and taking photos of its far side, which can't be seen from Earth. Nothing wrong with that, lots of scientific and public interest there. But the final stage, E4, was much the same as Project A119, striking the moon with a nuclear weapon as a show of force to the enemies and allies of the Soviet Union. It seems the US and USSR had a lot more in common than they realised in the 1950s. If it weren't for all this secrecy, they could have ended the Cold War decades earlier by just shaking hands and nuking the moon together. The ultimate bonding experience. I've been Peter Austin, and that was interesting. It sure was, Peter, well done. But now for possibly the most wholesome request I'm ever likely to make on the internet. I would like you to send me some photos of your teddy bears. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Now, it is teddy bears I'm looking for in particular, so if you send any other animal, it's far less likely to be used in the edit. I might include one or two. I don't mind if it's a licensed bear, like a Winnie the Pooh, but even better if not. You can send them to the email address on screen, but please note a couple of things. Firstly, put the word teddy or Ted in the subject line. Secondly, don't send me images that have people's faces in them. I just want the plushie itself. And thirdly, if you want any credit shown on screen when I use your image, please write that in the body of the email, whether that's your full name or part of your name or a social media handle, in which case specify the platform. If you don't write anything in there, I will assume that you want the image to be anonymous or to have no credit assigned to it. That's about it. The video will be going live probably sometime in the spring. I look forward to seeing all of your teddy bear images in my email inbox. And in the meantime, why don't you watch, is there a video on screen there? Click on that card and subscribe if you haven't, all that kind of stuff. There you go.